It wasn't dramatic. Nothing had happened. The living room was dim, only the television lighting the walls. The couch, still warm from sitting there all evening. The dishwasher hummed softly in the kitchen, a steady sound behind the wall. On the coffee table, a Target receipt rested beside the remote, the paper slightly curled at the edge. My husband sat beside me, leaning toward the armrest. The Netflix countdown appeared in the corner of the screen. 5 seconds. Neither of us touched the remote. 4. Ice shifted in his glass. 3. The next episode started automatically, the room filled with voices from the show. My hand rested on the cushion between us. My fingers pressed lightly into the fabric. The space felt wider than I remembered. "You still watching?" "Yeah." The show continued. The remote stayed in his hand, and for a moment, it felt like the evening had already decided without asking me first. The show kept playing, bright colors from the television moving across the walls. The living room dim except for the screen. The couch still warm beneath us. My husband leaned slightly toward the armrest. The remote rested in his hand. On the coffee table, a Target receipt lay beside an unopened envelope. The corner of the paper curled slightly upward. The dishwasher hummed softly in the kitchen, a steady sound behind the wall. The Netflix episode moved quickly through its opening scene, voices from the show filling the room. My hand stayed on the cushion between us, my fingers pressing lightly into the fabric. The space felt wider than I remembered. Not far, just enough to notice. My husband shifted slightly. The ice in his glass tapped softly against the side. "You still watching?" "Yeah." The show continued. The remote stayed in his hand. The next scene started. On the screen, someone laughed loudly. The laugh track rolled through the speakers, but the room stayed quiet. The dishwasher continued its low hum. From the hallway, the thermostat clicked once, a small, mechanical sound in the wall. My hand slid slowly across the cushion, feeling the seam between the cushions, the fabric cool beneath my fingers. The couch had always been wide, but tonight the middle space felt clearer, like something had been moved without either of us standing up. My husband leaned forward slightly, adjusted the remote, volume down 1 notch. The television voices softened. "Too loud?" "A little." He nodded, pressed another button. The volume settled lower. The show continued. My eyes stayed on the screen. But the rhythm of the room felt slightly off. Not wrong, just rearranged. On the coffee table, the Target receipt shifted when the air vent turned on, the thin paper lifting for a moment, then settling back down again. My husband took another sip from his glass. Ice clinked softly again. The sound brief, then gone. The Netflix episode reached its midpoint. Music swelled from the speakers, the characters on the screen arguing about something dramatic. But the living room stayed calm. The dishwasher hummed. The thermostat clicked once more. Outside, a car passed slowly along the street, its headlights sliding across the ceiling, then disappearing again. My hand remained on the cushion, my fingers pressing gently into the space between us, feeling the small dip in the fabric. My husband shifted again, his shoulder leaning farther toward the armrest, the cushion between us lifting slightly, the space widening just a little more. The show moved into another scene, bright kitchen lighting on the screen, actors speaking quickly. My husband reached forward, set his glass on the coffee table, beside the receipt. The glass left a faint ring of moisture on the wood. He leaned back again, the remote still in his hand. I looked toward the television, but my attention drifted briefly toward the couch, toward the space between us. It wasn't empty. Not exactly. Just quiet. Like a place where something used to happen without either of us thinking about it. My fingers traced the seam of the cushion. Once, then again. The fabric smooth under my hand. The Netflix episode ended. The screen dimmed for a moment. Then the autoplay countdown appeared again. 5 seconds. Neither of us reached for the remote. 4. My husband leaned slightly forward, watching the screen. 3. Ice shifted again in the glass on the table. 2. The next episode started. The television brightened the room again, voices filling the space. My hand stayed exactly where it was, on the cushion, feeling the quiet space between us. And for the first time that evening, I noticed the show had already started before I had said a single word. Morning came through the kitchen window. Soft light across the counter. The coffee machine clicked on automatically. A low grinding sound as the beans started turning. I stepped into the kitchen, the tile cool beneath my feet, the house still quiet. On the refrigerator, a small magnet held a soccer schedule, practice times printed in blue ink. Next to it, a grocery list written in my handwriting. Milk, dish soap, bananas. My phone rested on the counter beside the sink, face up. The screen lit briefly, a calendar reminder, then faded again. The coffee machine finished brewing, steam lifting slowly into the air. I reached for a mug, poured the coffee. The smell filled the kitchen. Behind me, a cabinet door opened. My husband walked in, still half awake. He reached for another mug, set it beside mine. "You taking the car today?" "I think so. I'll grab gas later." He nodded, opened the refrigerator, cold air spilling into the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed steadily behind the door. He took out the milk, poured some into his mug, then set the carton back on the shelf. His phone buzzed on the counter, a sports notification lighting the screen. He glanced down, scrolled once, then set the phone back beside the sink. We moved around each other easily, the same quiet rhythm as most mornings. I opened a drawer, looked for a spoon. The drawer slid closed again. My hand rested for a moment on the edge of the counter, the cool stone beneath my fingers. My husband took a sip of coffee, looked toward the window. "Looks warm out." "Yeah." The thermostat clicked once in the hallway. The air vent started quietly above us, warm air moving through the room. My phone lit again. Another reminder. Dentist appointment next Thursday. I tapped the screen, dismissed it. The coffee mug warmed both of my hands. From the front door, a soft sound of cardboard shifting. An Amazon box leaned against the wall, still unopened. The tape slightly wrinkled along the edge. My husband picked up his phone again. Another sports score appeared. He smiled slightly. "Game went late last night." "Who won?" He read the score out loud, then set the phone back down. The refrigerator door opened again, then closed. The kitchen filled with small sounds, cabinet hinges, coffee mugs touching the counter, the quiet movement of a normal morning. I walked toward the refrigerator, looked at the soccer schedule again. Practice tomorrow afternoon. The magnet held the paper slightly crooked. I straightened it, my fingers staying there a second longer than needed. The coffee machine clicked as it cooled. The dishwasher from last night finished its cycle, a soft mechanical tone. My husband finished his coffee, set the mug in the sink. I'll head out in a minute. Okay. He picked up his keys from the counter. The metal clinked softly in his hand. The front door opened. Morning light filled the hallway. See you tonight. See you. The door closed again. The house settled back into quiet. The refrigerator humming softly, the coffee mug still warm in my hands. My phone rested on the counter again, the screen dark now. I took another sip of coffee, looked toward the living room, the couch visible through the doorway, the throw blanket folded neatly over the armrest, exactly where it had been last night. The room still, the same quiet shape waiting there. I stood at the kitchen counter a moment longer, my fingers resting on the edge of the stone. The house running normally. Everything in its usual place. But the rhythm of the morning felt just slightly ahead of where I was standing. Evening came slowly. The sky outside the window already darker. The living room lit mostly by the television. I walked in carrying a folded throw blanket. The couch looked exactly the same as every evening. 2 cushions slightly dipped from sitting. The coffee table cleared, except for the remote. Beside it, the Target receipt from earlier still rested there. The paper flatter now. The air vent turned on quietly above the hallway. Warm air moving into the room. My husband was already sitting down, leaning back into the corner of the couch, his phone resting on his leg, a sports highlight playing softly on the screen. I set the blanket across my lap, sat down beside him, the cushions shifting slightly beneath my weight. The television screen moved through the Netflix menu. Rows of shows sliding left and right. My husband picked up the remote, his thumb moving across the buttons, the blue glow of the menu reflecting across his face. Recognition triggers. The Netflix autoplay suggestion appeared, a small countdown circle forming in the corner. He scrolled past one show, then another. Paused on one briefly. My hands rested on the blanket in my lap, fingers smoothing the edge of the fabric. The dishwasher started in the kitchen, water filling the machine with a low, steady sound. My husband stopped scrolling, pressed play. The show started immediately. The opening music filled the living room, bright voices from the television. I hadn't said anything yet. The decision had already been made. My fingers smoothed the blanket again, along the same crease, then once more. The fabric warm from the dryer. On the screen, characters walked into a bright kitchen, talking quickly, laughing. My husband leaned slightly toward the armrest, the remote still resting loosely in his hand. His phone buzzed once, a short vibration against his leg. He glanced down. Another sports notification. He opened the message, scrolled briefly, then set the phone on the table. The remote stayed in his hand. The show continued. My eyes followed the screen, but my hand moved again across the blanket, pressing down along the fold, flattening the same spot. The couch cushion between us lifted slightly, just enough to feel. Not far, just a small stretch of fabric. The dishwasher hummed behind the kitchen wall. The refrigerator motor started quietly, a low mechanical rhythm through the house. My husband laughed once at something on the show, a quick sound. Then he leaned back again. My eyes stayed on the screen, but the rhythm of the room felt slightly off. Not uncomfortable, just unfamiliar. On the coffee table, the Target receipt shifted again when the vent changed speed. The paper lifted for a moment, then settled. The Netflix show moved into another scene. Music swelled. My husband adjusted the volume with the remote, one notch lower, then set the remote on the table, closer to his side than the middle. The remote rested there, between the receipt and his phone. I noticed the position of it, without meaning to. My fingers smoothed the blanket again. The same fold, the same crease. The couch stayed quiet beneath us. The television continued talking. The dishwasher filled the kitchen with its low hum. Outside, a car passed slowly along the street, headlights sliding briefly across the ceiling, then disappearing. My husband reached forward, picked up his glass. The ice inside tapped softly against the side. He took a sip, set the glass back on the table, next to the remote. The moisture ring spreading slightly across the wood. The show kept playing. Voices, music, bright lighting on the screen. But the room itself stayed calm. My hand rested on the blanket again. Still now, the fabric soft beneath my fingers. And the remote remained on the table, closer to him than the space between us. Another evening settled into the living room, the sky outside already dark. The television, the brightest light in the room. The couch held the same quiet shape. 2 cushions slightly pressed down. The throw blanket still folded beside me. The coffee table looked almost exactly the same. The remote rested near my husband's side. Beside it, his phone faced down on the wood. Near the edge, the Target receipt remained where it had been. The paper slightly wrinkled from the air vent earlier. My husband leaned back against the armrest, scrolling through something on his phone. The screen reflected faintly across his face. I sat beside him, my shoulder against the back cushion, my hand resting lightly on the couch between us. The space in the middle a little clearer tonight. Not empty, just visible. From the kitchen, the dishwasher finished its cycle, a soft mechanical tone, then silence. A few seconds later, the refrigerator motor started again, low and steady. My husband set his phone down, reached for the remote. The Netflix screen appeared again, rows of shows sliding across the television. Recognition triggers. A new autoplay suggestion appeared, a small countdown circle forming again. He scrolled once, then stopped, pressed play. The show started immediately. The room filled with voices again, music rising through the speakers. My hand slid slightly along the cushion, feeling the fabric beneath my fingers. The seam between the cushions, cool under my palm. My husband leaned a little farther toward the armrest, his shoulder pressing deeper into the corner of the couch. The space between us widened, just slightly. The show moved quickly through its opening scene, someone on the screen laughing loudly, the laugh track filling the room. But we didn't laugh at the same moment. My husband smiled briefly, then looked back at the screen. A few seconds later, I smiled too, but the sound had already passed. The dishwasher door opened softly in the kitchen, a faint clink of dishes moving inside. My hand moved again along the cushion, slowly across the empty space. The fabric dipped slightly beneath my fingers. The throw blanket slid a little closer to my lap. My husband shifted his position, adjusted his glass on the table. The ice inside tapped against the side. He picked up the remote briefly, lowered the volume one notch. Too loud? It's fine. He nodded, set the remote back down, still closer to his side. The show continued on the screen. Two characters argued about something dramatic, voices rising, music swelling. But the living room stayed calm. The refrigerator hummed. The thermostat clicked once in the hallway. My hand rested on the cushion again, my fingers pressing lightly into the space between us. The couch felt wider tonight, or maybe the middle cushion had simply stopped filling itself. My husband reached for his phone again. The screen lit. A sports notification appeared. He opened it, scrolled, then set the phone back down. The show moved into another scene. Brighter lighting, fast dialogue. My husband laughed once again. A quick sound, but by the time I looked toward him, the moment had already passed. The living room returned to its quiet rhythm, the television talking, the refrigerator humming, the couch steady beneath us. My hand remained on the cushion, feeling the space beside me. Not far, just wide enough to stay noticeable. Weekend afternoon arrived quietly. Sunlight moved across the living room carpet. The television was off, the room brighter without it. The couch looked the same as every other day, the throw blanket folded over the armrest, the coffee table holding the same small things, the remote, his phone, the Target receipt still resting near the edge. I sat on the couch with my phone in my hand. My husband sat beside me, leaning slightly toward the armrest again, both of us looking down at our screens. My phone lit with a message, a friend asking about dinner next week. I typed a short reply, sent it. The screen dimmed again. Beside me, my husband's phone lit briefly, a sports highlight notification. He tapped it, watched the clip silently. The room stayed calm. Outside, a car passed slowly along the street. The sunlight shifted a little farther across the carpet. The refrigerator hummed softly from the kitchen. My thumb moved along the edge of my phone, scrolling through something without really reading it. On the coffee table, the remote rested where it had been since last night, closer to his side. The Target receipt lifted slightly when the air vent turned on, then settled again. My husband leaned forward, set his phone down on the table, next to the remote, the two objects touching lightly. He leaned back again. The couch dipped under his weight. My hand moved toward the coffee table, not reaching for anything, just resting on the edge. My thumb brushed the side of the remote, the plastic smooth beneath my skin. I turned it slightly, then let it rest again. My husband's phone buzzed once more. He glanced down. Another sports notification. He opened it, scrolled through a few lines, then locked the screen again. The house stayed quiet. No television voices, just the refrigerator motor, the faint hum of the air vent. My thumb moved along the edge of the remote again, tracing the small ridge of the buttons. The couch cushion between us stayed undisturbed, the space in the middle wide enough for my hand to rest there. My husband shifted slightly, adjusted his position, his shoulder leaning more toward the armrest. The sunlight reached the coffee table now, touching the edge of the Target receipt. I noticed something small then. Not a change, just a pattern I hadn't seen clearly before. I noticed I had stopped expecting him to turn toward me. My thumb rested against the remote, the plastic cool under my skin. The living room stayed quiet. My husband reached for his phone again. Another highlight, another short video. He smiled briefly, then set the phone back down. The sunlight continued moving across the floor. The refrigerator hummed softly. The throw blanket stayed folded beside me. My hand remained on the coffee table, resting against the remote, and the space on the couch between us remained exactly where it was. Dinner ended quietly that evening. The plates stacked in the sink, the dishwasher door open beside the counter. Warm air from the vent moved slowly through the kitchen. My husband carried his glass into the living room. I followed a few seconds later. The couch looked the same, the throw blanket folded where I'd left it earlier. The coffee table cleared except for the usual things. His phone, the Target receipt, the remote. Tonight it rested in the middle cushion, perfectly between us. Neither of us touched it. For a moment, the living room stayed still. The television screen dark. The dishwasher began its cycle in the kitchen, water filling the machine with a low, steady sound. My husband sat down first, leaning into the corner of the couch again. I sat beside him, the cushion dipping slightly beneath my weight. The remote stayed in the middle space, not closer to him, not closer to me, just resting there. Recognition triggers. The thermostat clicked softly in the hallway. The dishwasher hummed behind the kitchen wall. My hand rested on the couch beside my leg, my fingers tracing the seam between the cushions. The space in the middle clear tonight, the remote lying there. My husband leaned forward slightly, looked at the screen, then at the remote. For a second, neither of us moved. The dishwasher continued its steady hum, water moving through the machine, the house settling into its evening rhythm. My husband reached forward first, picked up the remote, his thumb pressing the Netflix button. The screen lit immediately, rows of shows appearing across the television. The blue light filled the living room. He scrolled once, then stopped, pressed play. The episode began. No one asked what the other wanted to watch. The music filled the room, bright voices from the television. My husband leaned back again, the remote still in his hand. My hand moved slowly toward the middle cushion, resting there, the fabric cool beneath my fingers. The remote now gone from the space, but the space itself still there. The throw blanket slid slightly across my lap, my fingers smoothing the fold again. The dishwasher hummed steadily. A car passed outside, headlights sliding briefly across the ceiling, then disappearing. The show moved into its first scene, characters talking quickly, laughing loudly. My husband smiled once, a quiet breath through his nose. My eyes stayed on the television, but my hand remained on the cushion, where the remote had been. The fabric held a small dip there, just enough to notice. The couch felt wider again, not empty, just open. My husband lifted his glass, ice shifting against the side. He took a sip, set the glass back on the table, beside the receipt. The show continued, voices filling the room, music rising and fading, the dishwasher humming behind the wall, the thermostat clicking once more. My hand stayed where it was, on the middle cushion, feeling the space where the remote had rested, and the place where the question never needed to be asked. Evening returned again, the same living room, the same couch, the television already on when I walked in, blue light moving slowly across the walls. My husband sat in the corner of the couch, leaning toward the armrest, his phone in one hand, the remote resting beside his leg. I sat down beside him. The cushion dipped beneath me. The throw blanket slid across my lap. The middle cushion between us stayed clear. Not empty, just visible. The show continued playing. A scene halfway through an episode, characters arguing loudly about something dramatic. But the room itself stayed quiet. From the kitchen, the dishwasher hummed softly, a steady mechanical sound behind the wall. My husband picked up the remote, lowered the volume slightly, then set the remote down again, closer to his side. His phone buzzed once, a sports notification lighting the screen. He opened it, scrolled briefly, then locked the screen again. The television voices filled the room. My hand rested on the couch beside me, my fingers pressing lightly into the fabric, the seam between the cushions beneath my hand. The space in the middle stayed the same. I leaned back slowly, the cushion behind my shoulders soft, my body shifting slightly away from the center, just enough to notice. Not intentional, just comfortable that way. My husband leaned forward, picked up his glass. Ice clinked softly against the side. He took a sip, set the glass back down beside the remote. The moisture ring widened slowly on the table. On the television, a character laughed loudly. My husband smiled at the screen. The laugh track faded. The scene changed. I watched quietly, my hands resting in my lap now, fingers loosely folded together. My husband leaned farther into the armrest, the couch dipping slightly beneath him. The space widened again. The dishwasher finished its cycle. A soft tone from the kitchen, then silence. A few seconds later, the refrigerator motor started again, low and steady. My eyes stayed on the television, but the rhythm of the room felt slower tonight. Not tense, not uncomfortable, just quieter than it used to be. My husband reached for the remote again, paused the show. A menu appeared on the screen. Want to keep watching? Sure. He pressed play. The episode started again. The remote returned to the table, still closer to him. The blue light from the screen moved across the couch, across the throw blanket, across the empty middle cushion. My hand rested beside my leg, my body leaning slightly away from the center, the couch wide beneath us. For a moment, a small question passed through my mind. Was it always this quiet? The show continued, voices filling the room. My husband watched the screen, the remote resting beside his glass. The middle cushion stayed clear. My hands remained folded in my lap, and the space between us sat there quietly, as if it had always belonged there. Night settled quietly over the living room. The lights were off now. Only the television lit the room, blue and white colors shifting across the walls. My husband sat in the same corner of the couch, leaning into the armrest. The remote rested near his hand. His phone lay beside it on the coffee table. The Target receipt still there, edges slightly curled now. I sat beside him, the throw blanket across my lap, the middle cushion between us undisturbed. The show continued playing, voices from the television moving quickly, music rising and falling. But the room itself stayed still. From the kitchen, the dishwasher hummed softly, a low, steady sound behind the wall. The refrigerator motor started again, another quiet rhythm through the house. My hands rested in my lap, fingers loosely folded together, the fabric of the blanket warm beneath them. On the screen, a character laughed loudly. The laugh track echoed through the speakers. My husband smiled slightly, a short breath through his nose. The sound small, then gone. The show moved into another scene. Faster dialogue, bright lighting. The middle cushion stayed empty, the fabric smooth between us. My hand moved slowly toward it, not reaching for anything, just resting there. My fingers pressing lightly into the seam, feeling the coolness of the couch fabric. My husband picked up his glass. Ice shifted against the side. He took a sip, set the glass back down beside the remote. The moisture ring widened slowly on the wood. The dishwasher continued its steady hum. Outside, a car passed down the street. Headlights slid briefly across the ceiling, then disappeared again. The television voices filled the room, but the couch stayed quiet. My husband leaned farther toward the armrest, his shoulder pressing into the corner cushion, the middle space widening again. My hand remained there, on the empty cushion, the fabric dipping slightly beneath my fingers. My body leaned back, the cushion behind my shoulders soft. The throw blanket slid slightly across my lap, my hands folded together again, resting on the blanket. The show continued. Another scene, another burst of laughter from the audience. But neither of us laughed this time. The refrigerator hummed steadily. The thermostat clicked once in the hallway. The air vent shifted slightly above us. The television light flickered across the room, across the coffee table, across the remote, across the empty cushion between us. My husband reached for his phone. The screen lit briefly. Another sports notification. He opened it, watched a short clip, then locked the screen again. The phone returned to the table, beside the remote. The show continued, the room quiet again. My hands rested in my lap, still. The couch wide beneath us, the television filling the silence, and the space between us stayed exactly where it had settled. Another evening arrived the same way. The living room dim again, the television already on when I walked in, a quiet scene from the show moving across the screen. My husband sat in the same corner of the couch, leaning toward the armrest. The remote rested beside his glass. His phone lay on the coffee table, the screen dark. I sat down beside him. The cushion dipped slightly beneath my weight. The throw blanket rested across my lap again. The middle cushion between us stayed clear. The show continued playing, two characters talking quietly on the screen. The refrigerator hummed softly from the kitchen. The dishwasher had already finished its cycle. The house settled into its evening rhythm. My hand moved toward the middle cushion, resting there, the fabric cool beneath my palm. The couch seam pressed gently into my fingers. The space between us felt noticeable tonight. Not uncomfortable, just present. My husband reached for the remote, adjusted the volume slightly, then set it back down beside his glass. Ice shifted softly against the side of the glass. He took a sip. The show moved into another scene, brighter lighting, faster dialogue. My husband leaned farther into the armrest, the cushion beneath him dipping deeper. The middle space widened again. My hand stayed where it was, on the empty cushion, the fabric smooth under my palm. The throw blanket slipped slightly across my lap. My fingers pressed lightly into the seam. On the television, a character laughed loudly. My husband smiled, but the moment passed before I reacted. The refrigerator hummed steadily. The thermostat clicked once in the hallway. The air vent adjusted above the doorway. The television light moved across the couch, across the blanket, across the space between us. My husband reached for his phone. The screen lit briefly. Another sports highlight notification. He opened it, watched a short replay, then locked the screen again. The phone returned to the table. The room quiet again. My hand remained on the cushion, the fabric cool beneath my skin, the couch wide beneath us. For a long time, that space had filled itself naturally, leaning closer, sharing the blanket, passing the remote. But tonight, the space simply stayed where it was, not asking to be closed, not asking to be noticed, just present. The show continued, music rising softly in the background. My husband watched the screen, the remote resting beside his glass, the moisture ring spreading slowly on the wood. My hand remained on the middle cushion, feeling the empty space beneath my palm. And the couch held the distance between us as if it had learned how to keep it there. Evening arrived again, the living room already dim when I walked in, the television on, a quiet scene from the show moving across the screen. My husband sat in the same corner of the couch, leaning toward the armrest, the remote resting beside his glass, his phone on the coffee table. Screen dark, I sat down beside him, the cushion dipping softly beneath my weight. The throw blanket folded across my lap. The middle cushion between us stayed open, the fabric smooth, undisturbed. The show continued playing, two characters talking quietly on the screen. The refrigerator hummed softly in the kitchen, a steady, low sound behind the wall. My husband reached for the remote, adjusted the volume once, then set it back down beside his glass. Ice shifted softly in the glass when he lifted it. He took a sip, set it back down. The moisture ring spread slowly across the table. My hand rested beside my leg, not reaching toward the middle cushion this time. The throw blanket stayed still across my lap. On the television, a bright scene appeared. Laughter from the audience filled the room. My husband smiled briefly, then leaned back again. The couch settled beneath him, not widening, not closing, just there. My eyes followed the screen, the television light moving across the walls, across the coffee table, across the empty cushion. My husband shifted slightly, his shoulder pressing deeper into the corner of the couch. The remote stayed near his side. The refrigerator motor stopped. The house quiet for a moment. Then the thermostat clicked softly in the hallway. Warm air moved through the vent above the doorway. The throw blanket slid slightly across my lap. I adjusted the fold once, then let it rest again. My husband picked up his phone. The screen lit briefly. Another sports notification. He opened it, watched the clip, then set the phone back down. The show continued playing, music rising in the background, the living room calm, the couch wide beneath us. My body leaned back into the cushion, the space between us unchanged. For a long time, that space would have filled itself. Someone leaning closer, passing the remote, sharing the blanket. But tonight, the space stayed where it was. My hands rested loosely in my lap, the throw blanket warm beneath them. The television continued talking. My husband watched the screen, the remote beside his glass, the Target receipt still on the table. the house settling into its quiet evening rhythm, and the space between us remained exactly the size it had become. Another evening, the living room already quiet. The television paused, a dim screen reflecting the room. The remote rested on the coffee table, not in anyone's hand. My husband sat in the same corner of the couch, leaning slightly toward the armrest, his phone beside him, face down. I sat beside him, the cushion dipping softly beneath me, the throw blanket folded across my lap. The dishwasher hummed softly in the kitchen, a steady, low sound behind the wall. My husband reached forward, picked up the remote, pressed play. The screen brightened again. A new episode started. Neither of us said anything. The refrigerator motor turned on, a quiet hum filling the pause between scenes. My husband leaned back again, the remote resting loosely in his hand. The throw blanket shifted slightly across my lap. I adjusted the edge once, then left it there. The television light moved across the coffee table, across the Target receipt still resting there, across the empty cushion between us. My husband set the remote down again, closer to his side. The show continued playing, characters talking quickly, music rising behind their voices. My husband watched the screen, his elbow resting against the armrest. The couch dipped deeper beneath him. The middle cushion remained unchanged. My hand rested loosely on my knee, not reaching toward the center, not adjusting the blanket, not moving closer. The house quiet around us, the dishwasher cycle ending in the kitchen. A soft click from the thermostat in the hallway, warm air moving through the vent. My husband reached for his phone. The screen lit briefly. Another sports notification. He watched the clip, then locked the screen again, set the phone back down. The television continued talking, the remote resting near his glass, the Target receipt unmoved on the table, the couch wide beneath us. My hand stayed where it was. The show moved into another scene, brighter lighting, louder voices, but the room stayed quiet. My husband watched the screen. I watched the room, the couch, the coffee table, the remote, the space between us. And for a long moment, nothing in the room asked to be changed. Late evening, the television finally paused, the screen dim, the room quiet again. My husband stood first. The couch lifted slightly where he had been sitting. He carried his glass toward the kitchen. Ice moved softly inside it as he walked away. The dishwasher had already finished. The kitchen light came on for a moment, then dimmed again. I stayed on the couch. The remote rested on the coffee table, closer to his side. The Target receipt still lay beside it, unmoved. The throw blanket rested across my lap, warm from the room. The refrigerator hummed steadily behind the wall. A car passed slowly outside the house, its headlights sliding briefly across the ceiling, then disappearing again. The couch settled beneath me. The middle cushion between us remained open, the fabric smooth, cool beneath my hand. My husband moved quietly in the kitchen, a cabinet door closing, the sound of the sink running briefly, then stopping again. The thermostat clicked once in the hallway. Warm air moved softly through the vent. The television screen went fully dark, reflecting the living room now, the couch, the coffee table, the remote, the space beside me. I adjusted the throw blanket once, then let my hands rest loosely in my lap. The room stayed quiet. Normal house sounds. Normal evening. My husband turned off the kitchen light, The hallway dimmed. He walked past the living room toward the bedroom, the floorboards soft beneath his steps. The couch remained where it was, wide, still. The remote resting on the table, the Target receipt unmoved, the television screen dark, and the space beside me stayed exactly the size it had become.